I knew something was wrong the moment she laughed. It wasn't the sound of joy or surprise or even discomfort. It was sharp, hollow, and carried a kind of distance I had never heard from her before. I had only mentioned one small memory. Something simple, a moment from when she was little. And she brushed it aside like it meant nothing. We were standing in her living room when it happened. I told her how she used to run to me after school, carrying stories faster than her breath could keep up. She used to love hearing me repeat them back to her. But today, she just tilted her head and let out that cold laugh. "Dad, why do you always bring up old stuff? It's not that deep." Not that deep. The life I built for her. The years I carried her through. Reduced to old stuff. I felt the hit of it before I understood it. Something in her tone was wrong. It didn't belong to her. Not the girl I raised. It sounded practiced, like a line someone else had told her to say. Her eyes didn't match her voice. They drifted away from me, unfocused, like she couldn't wait for the moment to be over. I tried to smile through it, tried to pretend the sting wasn't spreading across my chest. But even as I stood there, I felt a strange tension filling the room. She moved around me like I was a guest who had stayed too long. Every gesture felt stiff. Every answer was short. This wasn't just distance. This was a disconnection. I reached into my bag and pulled out the journal, an old, worn book with her name written on every page. I had kept it for decades. Notes from her childhood doctor visits, letters I never sent, little milestones, drawings she handed me with proud hands, all the memories I thought she still held close. I placed it gently on the table beside her. "You remember this?" I asked. She barely glanced at it. Then she laughed again, softer but colder. "Why are you still holding on to that stuff? It's weird, Dad." Weird. That word cut deeper than she realized. I studied her face, waiting for a sign that she didn't mean it. Waiting for a flicker of the child who once sat in my lap and asked me to read her own story back to her. But there was nothing. Just a wall I couldn't see through. A thought crept into my mind. Quiet, unwelcome, but impossible to ignore. Someone had changed the way she saw me. Someone had taught her to treat our history like clutter. Someone had made her believe her past didn't matter unless it could be used. The laugh, the tone, the coldness, it all felt like echoes of a voice that wasn't hers. I looked at the journal again, the book that held the proof of a life we built together. And in that moment, I understood something I had never expected to face. She wasn't just pulling away. She was erasing me one memory at a time. Tell me, what would you do if your child laughed at the life you built for them? I opened the journal that night, the same one she dismissed with a laugh, and let the pages fall where they wanted. They landed on an old entry, written in my uneven handwriting from more than 20 years ago. "First steps," it read at the top. I had written it the same evening she tottered across the living room, arms thrown out like she was trying to catch the whole world. I remembered the way she fell into my chest, laughing so hard she could barely breathe. I wrote every detail down because I didn't want any of it to fade. That journal became the history of her life. Her first lost tooth, her first school play, her first report card where the teacher wrote, "She has a bright and curious mind." I kept it all. I wrote it all. There were pages where I documented the struggles too, the nights she couldn't sleep, the months when the bills were tight because I chose to put her needs first. I wrote about taking on extra shifts, about quietly skipping doctor visits for myself so I could save for her school supplies. I never planned to tell her any of that. I didn't write it for credit. I wrote it because I wanted her to know, someday, how deeply she was loved. She used to climb onto the couch beside me and ask me to read entries to her. "Tell me about when I was little, Dad," she'd say. And I'd open the journal and relive the stories as if they were happening again. She'd smile, laugh, and lean her head on my shoulder. Back then, she wanted to hear everything. She wanted to know who she was before she remembered it herself. As I turned the pages now, I saw the entries change. The moments grew heavier. The sacrifices grew larger. I found the page where I wrote about turning down a promotion because it required travel. I couldn't leave her alone. Not when she still needed help with school. Not when her mother wasn't around. Then came the entries about her teenage years. Late-night talks, school stress. The tension that sometimes surfaced when she felt the world was unfair. There were signs even then. Small ones, but they were there. Moments when she snapped at me for something minor. Times she acted like what I provided wasn't enough. A comment she made once, "Other kids have it better than me," that stung more than she knew. I brushed each moment aside, telling myself she was young, confused, overwhelmed. I never wrote those parts down. I didn't want them to shape how I remembered her. Then came the entry about her first boyfriend. I wrote that she seemed happy, but even then I noticed the change. She stopped asking for the journal. She stopped sitting beside me. She started keeping her phone closer, started stepping out of the room to take calls. A distance began forming, one I didn't understand at the time. Looking at those pages now, I could see the drift clearly. It didn't happen suddenly. It happened in quiet steps, just like her first ones. Only these led her away instead of toward me. I closed the journal slowly. Nostalgia sat in my chest, heavy and warm. But grief settled. Beside it, quiet, steady, undeniable. I didn't know it then, but those pages were the last place where our story still matched. It didn't happen all at once. It started with a few unanswered messages, small things that didn't feel serious at first. I would send her a picture of the garden she used to help me plant. No reply. I'd text her a simple, "Hope your day is going well." Nothing. I convinced myself she was busy. Everyone gets caught up in life, I told myself. But the silence began to repeat itself, stretching longer each time. Then I noticed she always replied when she wanted something. Money for a bill, help with her car, a quick favor. Her responses were short, almost clipped. "Can you send it? I need this done." No greeting, no warmth, no acknowledgement of the messages she never answered. It was like she kept me in a box labeled useful and only opened it when she needed something from me. I tried to ignore the sting. I sent more gentle updates. "I made your favorite soup today. Let me know if you need anything." I wanted to keep the connection alive, even if it was small. But each message felt like a stone dropped into deep water. No ripple came back. Her tone changed too. Even in text, I could feel it. She wrote like she was talking to a stranger, not her father. Formal, short, careful. It didn't sound like her voice at all. It sounded like someone else was standing beside her, watching every word. Sometimes, when she picked up the phone by mistake, I'd hear a man in the background. Low instructions, irritated sighs. And suddenly she'd hang up, sending a message later that always felt rehearsed. "I'm fine. Busy. Don't worry so much." None of it matched the silence she had been giving me. The inconsistencies grew sharper. She told me she was at work during hours she was posting online from home. She claimed her phone died while she was texting her friends. She said she didn't get my messages, yet her replies referenced things I had written earlier. Little cracks in her stories began to show, but she patched each one with a cold dismissal that pushed me farther away. One night, after I sent her a simple, "Good night," she finally replied, but not the way I hoped. "Why are you texting so much? It's too much pressure." Pressure? From a parent who only wanted to know if his daughter was okay. I stared at her message for a long time. I thought about all the years I had been her first call when she was scared, overwhelmed, or excited. Now I was someone she wanted to avoid. Someone she responded to only when it benefited her. Someone whose messages she treated like obligations. It took me longer than I like to admit. But the truth eventually settled in. Her silence wasn't an accident. It wasn't forgetfulness or stress. It was intentional. She wasn't just drifting away. She was closing the door, slowly, quietly, and without explanation. And for the first time, I realized she didn't want me in her world unless I came with something she needed. Tell me, when does silence become cruelty? The first call came on a weekday morning, just as I was pouring coffee. A woman from a financial aid office introduced herself, her tone polite but urgent. "Mr. Carter, we've been trying to reach your daughter for several weeks. She isn't responding to emails or calls. You're listed as her primary contact. Do you know if she's okay?" Primary contact. The words hung in the air, heavy and strange. I told her I hadn't heard from my daughter in days, sometimes weeks. The woman hesitated. "We need a missing document for her file. If she doesn't submit it, her funding could be delayed." Then, softer, "We're worried. This isn't like most students. We usually hear something." When the call ended, a quiet unease settled over me. If she wasn't responding to institutions, then the silence wasn't just for me. Something deeper was happening. 2 days later, a clinic called. A nurse explained they had been trying to remind my daughter about a follow-up appointment she had scheduled months earlier. "We've left several messages with no reply," she said. "Since you are still her emergency contact, we wanted to check in." Emergency contact. The role she refused to acknowledge in person, but relied on everywhere else. I asked if everything was okay. The nurse sighed. "We can't force her to come in, but missing follow-ups is concerning, especially with her previous medical notes." She didn't say more, but the worry in her voice told me enough. Later that week, HR from her job called me. Her job. They explained they needed her to confirm tax information. "She hasn't picked up any of our calls," the man said. "We're hoping you might have another number for her." I didn't have anything anymore. Every person who reached out repeated the same pattern. They needed her. They couldn't reach her. My name was still the one she had written down, the one she depended on for structure, for responsibility, for emergencies. Yet she had cut me off emotionally, like it cost her nothing. The more calls I received, the more concerned the staff sounded. One receptionist even whispered, "We're starting to get worried about her well-being." The fact that strangers saw red flags, while she insisted everything was fine, shook me more than I expected. That night, I opened a notebook and began writing everything down. Dates, times, names, departments. Not because I wanted evidence against her, not because I wanted to create trouble, but because something in me knew I might need a record of whatever was unraveling. As I wrote, a harsh truth took shape. She had shut me out of her heart, but not out of her paperwork, not out of her responsibilities, not out of the life systems she relied on. She had erased me in every way that involved affection or connection. But legally, financially, medically, I was still the one holding the safety net beneath her. And that contrast, that sharp split between the daughter who ignored my messages and the systems that still saw me as responsible, filled me with a creeping fear I couldn't shake. Something was wrong. Something was being hidden, and it was only a matter of time before I found out what. The first contradiction came wrapped in a shaky voice and a rushed excuse. After weeks of silence, she finally answered one of my calls. I didn't say anything emotional. I simply asked if she was all right, if she needed anything. She said she'd been too busy to respond. Yet 3 days earlier, she had posted photos from a weekend trip, smiling, carefree, nowhere near busy. I let it slide. I wanted to believe her. But the illusion didn't hold. A few days later, a financial letter arrived with my name printed across the top. It thanked me for updating my information on an account I didn't recognize. I stared at the document, the unfamiliar loan number, the signature that didn't quite look like mine. My first thought was that it had been mailed to me by mistake. My second was a sinking suspicion I wasn't ready to admit. I called her again. She picked up this time, but only after several rings. "What now, Dad?" she said, her tone sharp, and "I got a letter," I replied quietly. "Did you use my name on something?" She exhaled loudly. Why would you even ask me that? Before I could explain, I heard him, her partner, in the background. A low murmur I couldn't make out, followed by a sudden shift in her voice. She sounded coached. The warmth she used to have was gone, replaced by something stiff, almost rehearsed. "I don't know what you're talking about," she said. "You're imagining things." But I wasn't imagining the letter, and I wasn't imagining the whisper behind her words. I asked one more time, gently, "Did you fill out anything using my information?" "No," she snapped. Then, contradicting herself within seconds, she added, "And if something was updated, it was probably a mix-up. Those places mess up paperwork all the time." 2 explanations, neither matching the other. That was when the cracks widened. Over the next week, more letters showed up. Notifications about accounts I didn't open. Requests for verification I never submitted. A loan inquiry using my credit profile. The dates matched the same period she stopped responding to my messages altogether. I reached out again, hoping, wrongly, that honesty might appear if I stayed calm. But she grew angrier, more defensive, more evasive. "Stop digging into my life," she said sharply. "You're always trying to control everything." Control, that word again. One she used often now, but never in the right context. And each time she said it, I could hear the same faint presence beside her, the partner whose voice pushed her tone into something unrecognizable. That was when I began looking back at her stories. The timelines that didn't match. The excuses that fell apart when I checked the dates. The times she claimed she was working when her job called me trying to reach her. The moments she pretended she didn't see my texts yet, responded in ways that proved she had. Piece by piece, the illusion cracked open. This wasn't forgetfulness. This wasn't stress. This wasn't a phase. It was manipulation, coercion, control tightening around her life and mine. And the worst part wasn't the lies themselves. It was realizing my daughter wasn't the one pulling the strings. Tell me, when would you start piecing the truth together? I never expected to open my front door and see 2 caseworkers standing there. One held a folder tucked tightly under her arm, and the other gave me a steady, careful look. The kind someone gives when they know the conversation ahead won't be easy. Mr. Carter? The woman asked. I'm Ms. Delaney with Adult Protective Services. This is Officer Hill from the Welfare Review Unit. We need to discuss your daughter. My heart tightened. Not because they were here, but because part of me had been waiting for this moment without admitting it. I let them inside, my hands unsteady as I guided them to the kitchen table. They didn't waste time. They opened the folder and laid out printed emails, unanswered call logs, and notes from institutions that had tried, repeatedly, to reach her. Every page confirmed what I had been trying to tell myself wasn't happening. Her unresponsiveness is becoming a documented pattern, Ms. Delaney explained. And since you're listed as her primary contact, we need to verify what you know about her situation. I swallowed hard and told the truth. She blocked my number months ago. They both paused. Officer Hill leaned forward. Blocked it completely? Yes, I said quietly. I've tried everything. Messages, calls, nothing goes through. Their expressions shifted in a way that made the room feel heavier. They'd heard this before, just in different families, different stories, all leading to the same concern: isolation. They asked if anything else seemed unusual. I slid the stack of financial letters across the table, the ones with my name misused, the suspicious inquiries, the documents I didn't recognize. Ms. Delaney's eyebrows tightened. These are serious. Then I reached for the journal. It felt almost fragile in my hands as I laid it down beside the letters. This is her life, I said, my voice breaking more than I wanted it to. Everything I did for her, every moment, I kept it so she'd know she was never alone. They turned the pages slowly, reading entries written long before any of this pain ever existed. Something softened in their faces. Not pity, but recognition. They saw the father I had been. They understood the weight of what was being lost. I explained the contradictions in her stories, the cold tone, the partner in the background. I explained how each new lie matched another financial irregularity. Officer Hill tapped his pen lightly. This aligns with coercive control indicators: isolation, emotional distancing, financial misuse. It's concerning, Mr. Carter. My breath caught. Hearing it said aloud cut deeper than I expected, but it also gave shape to the fear I'd been carrying alone. We're opening a welfare note today, Ms. Delaney continued. It isn't a full investigation yet, but it will document that her behavior puts her at potential risk, and that someone may be influencing her access to support. For the first time in months, I felt something steady inside me. Validation. Someone finally saw what I saw. Someone understood this wasn't bitterness from an old parent, but real danger shaping her life. When they left, I stood at the door watching them walk down the path. My fear hadn't gone away, not even close. But beneath it, a quiet resolve took hold. This was no longer just my burden. The truth was finally in motion. Tell me, should authorities intervene sooner in cases like this? The courtroom felt colder than I expected. Not because of the air, but because of the distance between who my daughter used to be and the woman sitting across from me now. She didn't look at me when I entered. She kept her eyes fixed on the table, her arms folded, her partner close enough that his presence shadowed every inch of her posture. The judge called the session to order, and the evidence began to unfold like a slow, painful unraveling of the life I once knew. The welfare report came first. Missed calls, ignored letters, institutions unable to reach her. Then the financial documents followed. The loan inquiries, the altered forms, the digital signatures tied to devices that weren't mine. Each piece landed with a weight that pressed deeper against my chest. But nothing hit harder than when the prosecutor lifted my journal from the evidence box. "This," she said softly, "is a record of 30 years of care and support." I watched my daughter shift in her seat, discomfort flickering across her face. The pages were turned slowly, the entries read aloud like a story the court needed to understand before they could judge the ending. The judge listened closely. He didn't rush. He didn't interrupt. He let each entry show exactly who I had been to her. Provider, protector, the only parent who stayed. The journal became a witness, one I never thought I'd need. When it was her turn to speak, she stood slowly. Her voice was defensive from the start. "He exaggerates everything. He always has. He's just trying to make me look bad." Every word felt like a knife, twisted in a wound that had never healed. She wouldn't look at me. She stared past me as if admitting one soft truth might crack the wall around her. The judge folded his hands. "Ms. Carter, the evidence shows significant manipulation and coercive control in your life. Your father's concerns are not baseless. They are consistent with financial exploitation patterns." "I didn't do anything," she argued, her voice rising. "He just wants control." Her partner leaned forward, whispering something quick and sharp. The judge noticed. His eyes narrowed slightly. "Sir," the judge said, addressing the partner, "you will remain silent in these proceedings." For the first time, her partner leaned back. But the damage was already visible in the way her shoulders tensed, the way her tone shifted with his movements. The judge continued, heavier now. "Given the evidence and the documented misuse of Mr. Carter's identity, this court is issuing restrictions. You are barred from accessing any financial or legal documents belonging to either party. Further investigation into coercive influence and fraud will proceed immediately." Her partner didn't react outwardly, but something cold settled in the room, as if the truth had finally cornered him. The verdict validated everything I had feared, but it didn't heal anything. It didn't bring her back. As the judge spoke of elder abuse, parent alienation, and the seriousness of exploiting someone who had given everything, it felt like listening to the obituary of the relationship I once had with my daughter. When the session ended, she walked out without a glance in my direction. Her partner followed close behind. And though the court stood on my side, all I felt was a quiet, crushing heartbreak. Tell me, was this judgment enough? The first holiday after the court hearing felt strangely quiet. Not empty, just peaceful in a way I hadn't allowed myself to feel in years. The house wasn't filled with old routines or false expectations. There were no calls I waited for, no messages I checked my phone for. I had finally stopped holding space for someone who no longer wanted to stand in it. Stepping back from her wasn't a single choice. It was a slow acceptance, one I resisted for longer than I should have. But after the truth came out in court, after watching her defend the man who pulled her away from me, I understood something I had tried to avoid for too long. Love cannot survive in a place where respect has died. I began taking care of myself again, waking up early, walking every morning, letting the quiet hours settle over me without trying to fill them. I joined a community group at the library. Nothing big, just weekly meetings where neighbors shared books, stories, and coffee. No one asked me about my daughter unless I brought her up. No one judged me for the distance. It was the first time in months I felt like I could breathe without a weight pressing down on my ribcage. One evening, as the air grew colder and the holiday lights began appearing on porches, I pulled out the journal again, not to hurt myself, with memories, but to honor what those pages meant. They held her childhood, her milestones, the life I poured into making sure she never felt alone. They held the version of her that existed long before manipulation twisted her vision of me. I sat at the dining table, the same one where she once did homework while I cooked dinner. The journal lay in front of me, its cover softened by years of being opened and closed with love. I read a few entries aloud, letting the memories drift through the house like warm breath on a cold window. Then I did something I had never done before. I closed the journal gently and set it down in the center of the holiday table. Not as an invitation, not as a plea, as an ending and a beginning. The place where I set it wasn't for her. It wasn't for the woman she had become. It was for the girl she once was, the one I carried through every hardship and celebrated through every triumph. It was my way of saying goodbye to the version of her who still lived in those pages, and releasing the version who no longer saw me. I know she may have children someday, and children ask questions. They want to know where they come from. They look for the pieces that don't fit in the stories they're told. Maybe one day those children will find this journal. Maybe they'll read the truth written in my own hand. Maybe they'll understand the kind of love that built the foundation their mother walked on. But I no longer wait for that day. Peace came when I finally accepted that respect isn't something a parent has to earn. It is something a child should give freely. And in my final years, I choose dignity over longing, truth over silence, calm over chaos. Tell me, what do elders truly deserve in their final years?